Start playing. Let's go. Woo! Welcome everybody. The Digital-Roundtable is on. We are broadcasting. We got some following going on already, and I'm excited about today. Today is a great day. Today is actually the day of the battle in Venezuela, where in the state, the Venezuelan armed forces gained victory from the Spanish conquistadores. So just a little fact there for you all. We have a great roundtable as usual. Go ahead, John.
I hope they didn't build a statue.
No, they didn't. So we got, John Butler, and how you doing, John?
That's fine, sir. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. And we got Llewelyn King, our own king. How are you, Llewelyn?
Very well, thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. And our guest speaker of today is none other than Charles Dickerson, a superstar grid old man that I've known for a while. How are you, Charles?
Fine. Thank you, Andres, and to the panel members. And my apologies for getting us off to a late start.
No reason to apologize. This has been a phenomenal day. You got the review of the news of the week, and I'm gonna kind of rattle through all that real quick, and then we'll settle down and spend some time talking about things. I'll be the microphone and go around and ask you to participate, and let's see what we have to do today about what's going on in the world. But real quick, the COVID-19 nationwide seems to be slightly slowing down nationwide. In some states seems to be creeping up. There may be some concern going on in some states that open up too soon. But the total death count, which is, a terrible tragedy, no matter how many numbers it is up 4,000 bodies of people from last week, which is too many, as usual. As I always say, it's up to 120,333 or so from the CDC website from last night. I'm sure the number has come up earlier today as well. All cases were up to 2.3 million. That is down only 64,000 cases from last week versus the week before, which was 80,000 cases. So it seems to be nationwide, seems to be tapering down, which is good news. On the unemployment side, 1.5 million claims went on last week, so that's no good. So I think we're on track to hit that infamous 30% unemployment by the end of the year. I know that the economy and everybody's working hard to get things back, and we're all optimistic about it. The stock market is a little bit flat. It's actually 900 points down from last week. But it's hovering in the 25,000, 26,000 points. The New York Exchange is hovering in the 11,000 points. Is roughly 400 points down from last week, and then NASDAQ is hovering in the 10,000 range. 10,000 point range, about 130 points down. Interest rates remain the same. The Fed's doing a great job with liquidity. One big company that went bankrupt all of a sudden, Hertz, big deal. They went bankrupt. They're trying to figure that out. So we'll get some comments from you all on that. Crude oil price is pretty steady, 60 cents down from last week. Price of gas in the Austin area is down 9 cents from last week. So any first thoughts and comments about how we're doing? How is the economy, COVID, Llewelyn?
Oh, he's muted. He's muted.
Llewelyn, you're muted.
Hello, sorry, I heard you. I think the situation across the country has actually deteriorated since last week, since last we spoke. in that we've had all these spikes in COVID-19, and it appears as though it is right on the edge of breaking out of all control. Internationally, it's playing very badly. We may be confined in the US. Countries may not allow our nationals in, which would be a severe blow to all sorts of things, from everything you can imagine, business, sports teams, vacations. So it's a very grave moment, and we've got this movement which is sort of quasi-political, which says wearing a mask and taking precautions is in some way unmanly or unpatriotic. That's a very dangerous situation to tribalize a disease with good guys and bad guys, politics. You know, it's really a very, very difficult moment in our history. And whereas 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, we thought we had turned some sort of corner, it appears that we have not, or that we've turned a corner, and what was found it was no better than what we turned from. So it's a very critical time. We've got to open the economy. That's going fairly steadily, but it is contributing to a lot of reckless behavior and will contribute to more deaths, more illness, more lack of confidence. The need for a scientific solution becomes more desperate every day, but there is no guarantee we'll get one. It is very difficult to build a vaccine. And there are things we have never succeeded in getting vaccines against. We have flu vaccines, but we don't have a vaccine for the common cold, and we don't have a vaccine for AIDS. So to assume that at the end of the year, by some magic, a vaccine will appear and it will work, that is an assumption that we cannot take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
John?
I think that's good. And let me just say this, the relationship between people doing what they should do is like if you're driving to New Orleans and there's a big, big storm all of a sudden, you slow your car down and you say, well, I must drive through the storm. Well, you know, we look at the COVID and we say, we're going to go through it, but we don't slow down, meaning that all of the precautions that's necessary, and when you have data from other countries that say if you follow the procedures, then we can run through this thing, but we cannot run through this thing with irrational behavior that deviates from medical expectations. That is the mask and the wiping. We know that if people conjugate, then it's very, very aggressive. So I think where we are now is we've decided to open up again, to just drive the car through the storm without still going 140 miles an hour. And I think that is a disaster that's sort of waiting. The other thing we need to do, and I'm happy to have Charles here so we can see if we can just grid up to the 21st century, is can you imagine that if each house had a meter that was smart, and so that we could send the data from the households to the hospitals, so that we don't have to depend on the tracking themselves, so that my water meter or my electric meter is not just a dumb meter sitting there, but I could just really go over there and hit it and say, now we have so many cases here, or we can say that my son or my grandson went to a party there, and then we would have all of this data so we can track it. So I think, Llewelyn, that's the kind of technology that we're capable of doing, and I certainly think we can do this.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, as usual, John. I think we have to look beyond simply waiting for a vaccine. We have to look for all
absolutely, and I think the economy.
What we are getting good at, and what we're going to get better at, is finding therapies for treating it in the hospital. There are several things. The steroid is one. Another one, which has just come to my attention, which I'm hoping to write about soon, is using low-level radiation that hospitals have on the premises. Apparently, if you irradiate patients, you get rid of the secondary inflammation, which is what kills everybody. So the therapies get better. So
yes.
That you're going to go to the hospital and automatically have to go onto a ventilator for 2 weeks. It may be possible to reduce the length of hospital stays and increase the effectiveness of hospital stays. But that is not a solution to infection. Infection remains a challenge, and we have to, as much as possible, operate the economy with careful regard to social distancing and, yes, wearing masks. And I think that the White House is not showing leadership in this is rather unfortunate, indeed catastrophic.
Yes,
John, finish your thought.
there are so many unknowns in this equation. For example, if you've been taking a regular flu shot for the last 40 years, what does that mean? What about the blood type? What does that mean? So the thing about this virus is, and you're right, Llewelyn, we do not have a vaccine, is that as we gather the scientific data, and what intrigues me, it might be that if you've been, taking a flu shot for the last, 40 years or 20 years or 30 years, that might have an effect also. Or if you have an O blood type, that might have an effect also. But to make a long story short, we need to slow down. We need to bring back the economy. But when we do this, you got to put your mask on. You have to stop gathering, and you have to do the things that we know when diseases spread.
So I'm curious what Charles can share from overall as a citizen, but from one point of view, I'm really curious, Charles. We don't talk about it, but the power grid hasn't stopped. Nobody took a vacation. It's running. What are you doing to make sure that you're all safe to keep it running? Because we all take it for granted. We come in and, COVID, no COVID, turn on the lights. We expect the lights to be on.
So thank you. And again, I appreciate the comments. Before I get into that, I want to say you listed, Andreas, a number of situations that are currently existing in the United States and the world. You were a little remiss that we also have a major social justice issue going on in the country. And it's relevant to this conversation and it's to John's point, there's so many factors. We don't know if the uptick is a result of just the states opening up early or a result of the states opening up early combined with all of the social justice initiatives, because a lot of the people didn't have masks. I'm not making a commentary plus or minus on that. It's just that it happened, right? Or it's one or the other. So that is going on as well. One could argue, well, why would people even do that? Because they may feel that the other circumstances in their lives are so dire that they're not even thinking about masks when they're doing that. So all those things come to play. I'm not here as an epidemiologist or a virologist or an economist, and while I have opinions about those things, I think Llewelyn and John said some things that are very important. I'm going to say this is kind of counterintuitive. I don't know what we make of the numbers in terms of infection rates. And I'm why. I've been doing a lot of reading on this. It's going to come back to your conversation around the utility, because as Chief Operating Officer, I'm responsible for the lives of many men and women who are out there who can't work remotely, because you can't put a transformer on a pole remotely. You can't read a meter remotely unless you have smart meters, of which Austin Energy does. You can't dig a trench remotely. So the latest data that I've been reading, I'm certain you all read it, is now a lot of doctors are saying, well, you really should wait 4 to 5 days before a possible exposure before you get tested, because a lot of evidence is now demonstrating that if you get tested sooner than that, it may show negative. The problem with that is that those people getting tested and showing negative, and this is a psychological effect, get this sense of relief, oh, I'm negative, and a lot of them let their guard down because they're negative, figuring all the things they did before are okay, and they wind up being super transmitters, right? And one person can transmit to 10, and you could do the math, it becomes, exponential explosion quickly. The other thing is, we talk about the numbers in terms of people infected. We don't even know how many people haven't been tested, right? Or how many false negatives they have, or how many false positives we have. So I think the only thing we know from certain is that people are likely to die, and we don't know what we don't know. Now, to the utility. We've taken a number of steps at Austin Energy that I feel particularly proud of. And by the way, I chair a call with the nation's largest public power utility COOs every week. We just moved it to every 2 weeks because of some of the things that have been changing in the states. And one of the things we did was quickly move our workforce from working in central locations to working remotely. That could not happen without proper digital constructs, without computers and telephones and wires so that you can be able to do that.
Yep.
The men and women who can't work remotely, have to do the things that Llewelyn and John was talking about. They have to wear masks. They have to wear gloves. They have to wash their hands frequently. To the extent that they're in the same vehicle, we're requiring some of them to sit in the front and some of them to sit in the back so we can get as much separation distance as possible. We're requiring them to report to us if they leave the area and go to hotspots, although now Texas is one of the biggest hotspots there is. So now almost everybody has to report for just being in Texas. So we're doing those types of things. We've closed down our walk-in centers because having them open when people walk in, there's a high likelihood of somebody getting spread the transmission. And in the areas where where people can't work remotely in an office setting, we are requiring distances greater than 60, because I've read studies about 3 weeks ago coming out of Asia and Europe that says 12 feet, 13 feet may be better. We wanted to get ahead of that. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that I'm certain John will mention at some point is even if you do all that, there are a number of studies that are showing that the air handling system, right? Certainly all familiar with the famous study out of China on a restaurant where the air handling system have you being exposed if you're 20 feet away from somebody, but not exposed if you're 5 feet away from the direction that the air is flowing. So all of those things are in play. I think to what Llewelyn and John said, we have sound medical advice we have at the time, recognizing that things has changed. And this is the last thing, and I'll say, and I'll pause. This is something John said this I think is very important about slowing down. I think one of the reasons why every other week we're getting different advice is because people are seriously and sincerely trying to figure out what this is. And whereas historically, those hypotheses would have been tested for 6, 9, 12 months to a year before we even saw about them in any kind of written form. I think these hypotheses, in the spirit of kind of community sharing of information in the medical field, they're making their way into mainstream media and we're reading them. So what's valid information this week may be moderated somewhat next week, and then it may come back to what it was before. So we just have to be ever diligent.
Yeah, yeah. I concur with what you're all saying, and I think that, you know, again, there's this fine line on how we come back and, you know, really put food and money on the table to pay rent and things. And so you know, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, and it's a tough thing to manage. And but I can tell you that you know, as I'm looking at my notes here on what's going on, I mean, as it relates to digitalization of industry in general, things are full throttle. I mean, you know, the CBRS 3.5 gigahertz wireless auction from the FCC is scheduled for July 23rd. It's expected to be one of the largest licensing events ever, where the FCC is going to collect a ton of money. CBRS 3.5 gigahertz, all about broadband using 5G inside the office building, and lots of stuff going on around that. Apple announced a new set of chips for their own products for the Mac, walking away from Intel. It's an interesting change of what's happening. They had a huge announcement earlier this week with their keynote and where they're doing a WWC, their worldwide conference for developers, WWCD. Connected car market is expected to reach $225 billion by 2027. So in a few years, the connected car market is going to be a phenomenal market opportunity in terms of, you know, cars all connected, maybe autonomous, some of them, and so on. 5G progress in China, which is a leading country in subscribers, up to 56 million subscribers now. And so when it relates to smart buildings, back to the comment of CBRS 3.5 gigahertz, Toyota, which has a North America headquarters in San Antonio, just tapped Nokia to build a private LTE network, 4G network, gradable to 5G in all their facilities. So 5G is moving pretty quickly. Everybody's really banking on it and expecting to put some money on that. In terms of smart cities, you know, there's the $1.5 trillion bill that is on the floor in Congress being negotiated right now. Things like New York Power Authority is moving forward with a very large project of putting LED and monitoring street lights on 500,000 lights in New York. Uber just signed an agreement with Marion County to basically manage and provide for the county all kinds of fleet services using the Uber account. So basically the county is out of owning vehicles and managing their vehicles, and it's going to go Uber 100% for the whole county. And you know, the high tech but world is you know, bursting through all this, right? We have talked many times in the past that COVID-19 is accelerating the adoption of digitalization for maybe something that's going to take 10, 15 years. It's happening now, you know, very quickly. And so I wanted to share with you all the number of cities and that are high end on high tech job salaries and how much they are on average. But San Francisco, New York, Seattle, LA, and Austin make the top 5 cities. So you can see that there is a concentration going on in this, you know, call it a divide between, you know, haves and have-nots on digitalization and what COVID is pushing folks with new business models. So what are your thoughts on that? Because, you know, I mean, I know that we're supposed to slow down. I know that the health problem is happening, but at the same time, there's a race going on in terms of who reinvents themselves the fastest. John?
Well, look, what's happening here is also the renegotiation of the supply chain. That is, underneath all of these things that companies are doing, you know, I'm looking here, what you sent us, whether it was what's being negotiated, what Toyota is doing, because what we do know is even with the technology that we have, even with the things in place, if you drop your iPhone now, it can't be replaced, okay? And with 5G coming in and all of the new business models that we've talked about, related to that is the supply chain. And let me say this, not only is a supply chain of general kind of products, but also the digital supply chain, okay? We know, for example, that the military has taken its members off of certain kinds of platforms from China. We know that all of these things are being related. If you look at what's happening at Uber, again, in a way, that's a relationship between what they do and the underlying of the supply chain. So what COVID has done is certainly the technology was sped up, but I think the most important thing now is the supply chain. And if you look at what's happening at the Charles, if you look at what's happening at the grid, we're trying to bring manufacturing back to America. I've been working with Washington, D.C. on that. And so, as we know, I mean, if we plug stuff up now, then we got to have all of the cities, right, being renegotiated for that. Another thing, Andres, is that, you know, if you look at American cities, here's a startling statistic for you. 98% of all of the great companies in the last 50 years have come from 3 areas: 128 Austin, Texas, and Silicon Valley. Now, and the reason for that, Andres, people like you who bring people to smart cities. So the idea of have and have-nots has been going, but it's always related to where entrepreneurs go and how they migrate toward smart cities. So I'll just say this and then I'll shut up. The more the city can be smart, Charles, you said we have a smart city, the more jobs we're going to have. The more jobs we're going to have, the higher prices are going to be. So I think that what's happening now is a renegotiation between cities. Our competition, when we sit down with economic developers, our competition is the Valley and 128 in Boston. Everybody else is trying. North Carolina is trying. Seattle has done a good job, is trying. But can you imagine 98% of all the companies coming from 3 regions? And the only company that has come out of my region where I was born in the South lately was Walmart. In 1865, we Southerners have only done Coca-Cola, Atlanta, Delta Airlines, the same family, and Walmart. And I give us Federal Express, although he put it there. So all of these interesting digital trends are related to the future. Right. Where people work, what kind of occupation. You should expect people to move to Texas in droves as cities become smarter. There's more data to look at. New enterprises are generating from that data and et cetera. So everything from the lighting of cities, all of this technology is going toward the smart city. It's a digitization of our life. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm not sure. But I know for one thing, if you stand in his way, it's going to run you over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Llewelyn's going to tell me, wait a minute, he remember when there were no lights and no digitization, and life was much better. I'm ready for it, Llewelyn.
On radio. I do not entirely, I partly agree with your analysis, but I have to dispute it. There's always been a concentration of entrepreneurs and new business where there have been resources. I mean, where resources used to go, for example, aluminum went to the West Coast with electricity. That was very cheap. Hydro, so you had an enormous boom in making aluminum on the West Coast. Theater has always been strongest in New York, and because you have it in New York, you have more of it. It becomes a magnet. What happened with Silicon Valley is it became a magnet. I think Austin has become a magnet. This is human resources, in fact, and financial resources, rather than physical resources, as you would get, say, in why so many automobiles were made in Michigan, when there was the right supply of coal, then of oil, and of transportation, both railroad and water. You've got to see where the resources are. The idea that you could just go and by government fiat or by will or get West Virginia to boom didn't work. I mean, it's often been tried. You can't just sort of say this is going to be a tech center or this is going to be a theater center. You've got to have the resources, and the resources are sometimes human. And of course, the more you get of something good, the more people come. This is not always desirable, and it's often very, very hard on the lower part of society. Rents go up, food prices go up, living gets very hard. It happened in New York City, which even 50 years ago, we used to say, this has become a city for the very rich and the very poor. Now, all those cities, which you listed, San Francisco, Austin, etc., are very rapidly becoming cities for the well-off and not for the poor. The digital divide is an economic divide. And while we're going through this huge social upheaval which is taking place here today, which Charles mentioned, we've got to look at how much that is exacerbated by the technological divide, not only computer literacy, but also the ability to get and earn a living wage in these hot cities like Boston, San Francisco, and Palo Alto.
Yeah. Charles, you have any thoughts on this? You got there you go.
Yeah, I was trying to be on mute when other people was talking to cut the background noise out. So I agree with what Llewelyn said. I don't disagree with John in full. I think that there is a number of why people may be attracted to cities. We got to remember, when you look at the New York case, I'm not even certain if the theaters is what drove people to New York. People was just coming here from other countries. It was the point of entry into the city, and that's where most people landed. One could argue that the theaters was built there because there were a lot of people there. And
that's not argued.
I'm sorry, Llewelyn?
No, I don't argue with you. You're quite
right.
Expressed it better than I do.
Right. And to your point, though, I'm not certain that we can argue that any particular area by fiat is going to be the next kind of spot for all of this new jobs and all of this new technology. I think it's going to be a number of factors and influences. So, for instance, one of the things that's driving a lot of the tech companies to is because our regulations in the state are not as onerous as they are in some other ones. And I don't use onerous as a pejorative or as a good. It's less cumbersome here. There are no state income taxes, which means they can probably pay slightly less salaries for the same jobs in other areas, but the spending power will be the same or higher. So there are a number of things that come to that. At the end of the day, I'm on this call and I'm learning from you gentlemen to reinforce what Andrea said. None of these things happen without the power of energy. And so we need to figure out how do we use digitization, I couldn't speak earlier, to further that. I heard John speak. He did us the pleasure of coming to Austin Energy and speaking about a year or so ago. I think a little over a year ago, and I was super impressed with what he had to say because I am a data junkie. I am particularly in love with correlations. And one of the things that we haven't even yet begun to do is to take all the homes, to John's point, and say, is there a correlation that can be made where we're comparing two totally disparate things between homes that have COVID and their energy use pre and post? And can we infer from that data with some really smart people who is likely to get it or what communities are likely to get it? Because we haven't been able to yet divine if there's some shift in how energy is consumed. Or let's forget energy, is there a shift in how water is being consumed? You know, a lot of people who have COVID have fever, so they drinking more water, they making more ice. And are there kernels that we can get from that digital data to move ahead of it so that we can stop it? And that's the power of digitization. The other thing is too, that I know, because I've witnessed it firsthand, I was a little shocked, I must say, Andreas, when I came here and found out that Austin Energy had almost 0 people working remotely. When I was a customer executive, when you and I met years ago, I had 60% of my call center people at times working remotely. But COVID forced that. You know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. And to her credit, my CIO, Mercedes Sanchez, on her team effort, but her as the leader, got almost every single person who can work with a computer and a phone out of the building at home where they could work in a secure fashion. But we weren't moving at that pace before then. And I think a number of other things are going to change, but we're going to have to keep the men and women on the front lines safe. We're going to have to provide them the information they need. We're going to have to keep the customers in the community safe as well. And the last thing I'll say, I agree with John 100%. We're going to have to slow down, but I want to add this term out, and I think people may agree, hopefully. Yes, but not slow down as much as probably speed up to doing things differently. We're not going to be able to go back to what we were before. So we're going to have to do things differently quicker, not the same thing quicker. We have to slow down trying to go back to where we were because we just are learning. But I think we should have every expectation and every intent on speeding up doing things more differently, such as bringing vaccines to trial faster, such as trying new therapies faster that we generally would have taken a long time to do it, and we should be able to do that. I saw an interesting article, gentlemen, I wish I had copied it. I get these things on my phone, these news feeds, and if you don't click on them right away, they get updated. But it was one of the major news streams said, post-COVID, more and more people are not going to the doctors, and the subtext was, and they're just fine. You know, and I'm not trying to undermine the medical community because we do have the other extreme where people are having serious issues and scared to go. But I think the subtext of the article was a lot of people are doing things at home and doing a little bit more wellness, and their quality of life is improving. Not that we want viruses, but again, we can learn from how can we change our behavior to make ourselves stronger and better even in the face of them. Andres, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Yeah, let me take a pause here. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm going to do my quick reminder of folks on our event coming up. It's now 100% virtual. It's going to be free. We have over 60 speakers confirmed, 16 keynotes, 11 panels. It's the Digital 360 Summit that will happen August 18th, 19th, and 20th, and then 25th, 26th, 27th. We're excited about that. And here are the companies that are going to be speaking. I actually have Greg Flay going to be on a panel, and then I have Cameron Freeberg, who's going to be in another panel from Austin Energy. Charles did a great keynote last year in our inaugural event. So excited about what's going on with Digital 360 Summit. Please look into it. And thank you again to our sponsors, Smart Water Summit, Smart Utility Summit. We're very happy that they provide sponsorship for the Digital-Roundtable. So let me go back to where we are before my last point to make here. and it's that, clearly I do see, gentlemen, an acceleration of things. I see a lot of utilities. We have had, I was expecting that when COVID hit in March that things were going to go completely dead, and it's not been the case. We've signed 6 projects in the last 60 days with the utilities. I mean, the need for automation, the acceleration to need to automate, to create a strategy to do so is increasing dramatically, no doubt, including in the utility sector. So I see, again, benefits to what's going on, and clearly people are learning to do things differently, buy things differently, rethink the problems, regroup workforces and processes, and there's a true remaking going on, and so I see that, and I would say the following elements to hear your comments. STEM, which is a battery company, just launched for the first time ever a solar plus battery independent power producer project in the state of Massachusetts, where they're intending to deliver megawatt style independent power producer at the ISO level clean energy for the marketplace to consume. It's first of its kind. They're starting with a megawatt facility, growing it to a 10 megawatt facility. They're looking at putting these facilities throughout the service territory in multiple places. So it's fascinating. Aclara just won the AMI network project at Austin Water, which I think it's another interesting transformation that is happening in Austin, again, to keep up with things. And then last but not least, I would like to hear your comments, guys, on, a while back that rumors that Tesla was coming to Texas, or it was going to Oklahoma, or it was going somewhere else. Well, Tesla is in Austin. They bought 2,100 acres, $5 million budget. They're getting from the state and the city some $60 million in incentives. Maybe not from the city because they're really outside the city. They're I think they're right outside the city limits, north of the airport, but they're right there, right? So, it doesn't get any closer than that. They're in the east side of town, just south of Decker Lake and north of the city airport. So I don't know what you can share, Charles, but Tesla is coming to town. What do you think about that, just as a citizen of Austin?
Well, if it's confirmed they're coming to town as a citizen of Austin and strictly as a citizen of Austin, I think that could be good. Jobs to be offered, and some of those jobs that can be had by some of the citizens of Austin. Mm-hmm. The things that I think, and Llewelyn said this, and I agree, we got to be mindful that the society is made of a range of people, socioeconomic strata and other types of strata. And if all the jobs, and this is not to suggest this is the case with Tesla, I'm just having a general comment, if all of the jobs are super technical, we're going to further disenfranchise an entire segment of the society. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to allow them to kind of help, be a part of that, or they're going to wind up being a drain on that, or maybe even more of a drain. And I don't, again, use that pejoratively. So as a citizen, I think it's a really, really good deal if they actually confirm that they're going to be coming here.
Yeah. Llewelyn?
Before you move on, may I make a comment? Because I didn't see this in the outline, and I'm really interested in John's thoughts on this, and Llewelyn's as well, and yours as too. Prior to COVID, there was a big push for the electrification of fleets. Mm-hmm. Big push by more, I'm going to say, progressive cities to get people out of cars and into mass transportation. This may be putting some headwinds on it because people may have some concern about that. It may not be a complete cut, but it could have some headwinds. And I'm curious around people's thoughts, because from an electric perspective, that was one of the ways that IOUs in particular was saying, well, how do we remain relevant with so much distributed energy on and still remain relevant to our investors and still play a part in society? And it would be kind of this electrification infrastructure play, but that may not be as prevalent as we initially thought pre-COVID.
Llewelyn?
Well, I think you're going to see a different kind of electrification. electrification. With electrification, you are going to see, first of all, you're going to have a lot more electric vehicles of every kind. Some of them will be interconnected. We will probably see individualized interconnected public transportation. I don't think we know the shape of that yet, whether it is an automated train with private compartments in it, which is highly feasible. It doesn't have to be the traditional vehicle with 30 people in a car. It could be little cars with just one person. Remember, when you get a movement going, it's not always what is initially thought. And if you draw a line, the cursor of draft paper, you could draw a line that goes up to infinity. But of course it doesn't, it changes. I thought it was quite significant that Segway is no longer going to make Segways, but they did start, if you will, personal city travel. It turned out that scooters were more efficient, cheaper, and just better on the whole. About the same skill to ride a Segway as a scooter, maybe a little more for a scooter. We're going to see more electrified bicycles. The electric bicycle is going to make a huge difference in transportation. Not everybody wants to ride a conventional cycle, but an electrified one offers some of the advantages of both, relatively cheap, about $1,000, and you're going to see a lot more of these. So that's going to take on, you've got to do something. If you go to Vietnam, for example, you'll see nothing but people riding everything from electrified bicycles to motor scooters, to mopeds, because you simply can't get cars on the roads. There aren't enough roads. A point of transportation saturation in our cities. Los Angeles, and when I've been in Austin trying to get in from the airport, I tell you, there's a lot of transportation problems. Hopefully you get Elon Musk and you put some boring company to work to drill a hole down underneath all this so you can get into downtown. But you've got to change transportation. You can't have people sitting in individual cars because there isn't enough space on the roads for them. And after a while, that becomes a detriment to a development of a city. People actually leave cities because of traffic. Washington's traffic, when I went to Washington in 1966, was de minimis. Now it's choking and getting worse all the time. So
John?
we're going to see electrification because it has no on-site pollution, and they have pollution somewhere else where you're making electricity, depending on how you're making it. But you will see more electrification. You will see more light vehicles, from bicycles to very small compartmentalized public trains of some sort. Let your imagination go. It's a good time to rethink transportation. But I would bet that the driving force will be electric. And as you move to the smart city, electricity becomes more critical, not less critical, which means you have to up your game on resilience, Charles.
Let me say that in defense of Austin, one time we had nowhere to go. There were no businesses here, and you could go anywhere. We like slow traffic because we like to count our money in the car. Also, let me take you back to the future. Take a page out of Llewelyn's book. At one time, Austin was all electric. At one time, New Orleans was electric. But let me take you down Congress Avenue when our buses had electric power, huge poles attached to the buses that were attached to electric wires. Mm-hmm. Let me take you back to when there were electric bicycles, if you will, and electric cars. So actually the return to electricity, just go dig up Congress Avenue and go look at the pictures, and you saw the buses with the huge, as I said, levels that was connected. So electrification is nothing new. As we have become more efficient with batteries, and we become more efficient with the storage of this thing that you must use when you produce it, then you should expect more electrification. Now, Llewelyn, we like to think of our cars like horses in Austin. We are not New Yorkers. Although we did have a situation here, Charles, you're like this. we had a lot of New Yorkers coming here, and we had an event. And what we're going to do, we're going to create a subway, just one car, and we're going to let them push each other all over the subway so they can feel at home. So what I'm saying is that it is a culture thing. My car is my horse, and I think it's going to be hard to get people out of there.
Well, it's going to be hard until the cars can't move, in which case people will be happy to go back.
Yes, I think we spread out so much, but I understand what you're saying. But it's coming. Certainly we're gonna have a big dig in Austin.
Forget about your horse analogy. I'm a horseman. I've had horses a large part of my life, and they are great recreation and terrible transportation, and we don't want to take that into transportation. But what is so attractive about the personal automobile, and what has to be overcome, or maybe it cannot be overcome, and that is when you get into your own car, your own automobile, your home, it's got your stuff in it.
Yes, but I have New Yorkers friends who can't even drive. They can't drive.
Well, that's true, but I made a television program over in San Antonio earlier this year, and one of the women couldn't drive, and apparently this is a big problem when you have to stay home, because one thing you can do with COVID is you can go for a drive by yourself, but you cannot do it if you don't have a car. That was something that nobody anticipated.
So sounds to me like you're all confirming what I see in the tea leaves. Uber doing a deal with Marion County to manage all the cars in the city. Electric cars, small cars, COVID ready, healthy, Wi-Fi built in, 5G, right? Now, we have talked about the fact that we see a trend, everybody's betting the cities will get bigger and bigger and bigger, but there is a point where cities choke, right? And so I think COVID have pushed the trend in many ways for people to move out of the cities that are choking, cost of living, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens sort of in the metro areas, right? Like Dallas proper and Houston proper city limits are not that big compared to Austin. They're actually pretty similar. It's the metro areas that are huge, right? And our metro still has lots of room to grow. Like we could have, I've always said that Travis County could have 6 million people, just like LA County does.
It is the movement. It is the movement of entrepreneurs. When entrepreneurs and enterprises die, city die. My earlier point is, these cities draw entrepreneurs. I'm not worried about what Charles and Llewelyn come to Austin. I want another Michael Dale. I want another Musk to come to Austin to create jobs. So what we find, the only thing I can tell you about Austin is this. If we do the wrong thing, we'll look like Detroit in 50 years.
Right.
Let me tell you
about Austin. If we don't continue to bring entrepreneurs here, to stay ahead of the technology curve, to create new kind of business enterprises, there's nothing natural about the movement of time that would make a city a city. A city will live and die related to technology transfer, what entrepreneurs do, and how entrepreneurs take their companies from city to city.
And things you've never even thought of. But going back to Charles's point, all the large cities in the world have had to go to extensive public transportation in order to relieve congestion. Mm-hmm. This is true of the older cities, London, Paris, New York, Boston, Chicago, even San Francisco, our little cable cars. Public transportation is now really critical in most large cities that are congested, or you simply cannot get from one side to the other. And for all the boosterism about Texas, it is very difficult to get around, and a bit parochial, if I might say so, parenthetically. It is very difficult to get around. I used to own the Energy Daily. I founded it. And I went to Houston a lot because, you've got high tech, they've got oil. And getting around Houston, the next appointment you have is 25 miles in a traffic jam from where you are now. It is a very difficult place. And this is what happens unless you have efficient, fast transportation. And Elon Musk, whom you've endorsed because he's going to move Tesla to your little corner of the earth, is somebody who understands that. And I think not only has he revolutionized space transport, revolutionized surface transport with electric vehicles, but he's going to revolutionize subways, because I think the Boring Company underground tunneling system is going to lead to something. I don't think it's going to be the way he envisaged it, tubes, but something that will go clear of the traffic, fast, safely, and will be electrically propelled.
Let me
We do have
just
public transportation. They're just empty in Austin. All the buses.
let me just close this point by telling you that, in my humble opinion, I think mass transit is dead. It needs to be reimagined. It needs to be reinvented. I think the Uber model wins. But I'm curious, because I don't want to leave without Charles getting some nuggets out of Charles. So Charles, Austin is growing. Hold on. Charles, Austin is growing like crazy. We're going to have 6 million people in Travis County.
Okay.
What is Austin Energy doing about clean energy, microgrids, batteries? What's Austin Energy thinking about it now?
So where would you like me to start first?
You pick.
Clean energy. We just recently got City Council to approve our next generation resource plan in 2035, which in effect has us being carbon free with respect to our generation portfolio. We continue on a frequent basis to test the market to determine what are the price points for renewables, but we also do a combination of renewables combined with solar to see how that's going. One of the things we have to always remember is until we get batteries where we need to do, renewables are not dispatchable. Or when the wind blows, when the sun shines, or when the cloud cover comes. So those things are good, except when they're not working. So we need to continue to have an evolution, technological evolution of how batteries are going to be deployed. One. Number two, with respect to all of this growth, again, and I say this very humbly, none of these things function without energy. So we continue to look at and evaluate the condition, but the smart data information, meter information will allow us to be more predictive about it as opposed to being reactive about it. But we continue to build our city in support of these things, not only in support of basic infrastructure, but we've been very proactive in working with the 5G community in support of how you bring more 5G in. We've also been very open to how do we change some long-standing power you may have had about where you power things from, and imagining and thinking about it differently, doing that. The other thing that we need to get a lot better at, and this is not specific to Austin Energy, this is just specific to municipalities, government structures, is that, government agencies tend to think of themselves as being non-competitive. But the reality of it is everybody's competing for talent. And if we aren't going to have new processes in to make things more streamlined, then we're going to wind up losing. So I'll give an anecdotal example of something that recently happened. I don't want to give the young lady's name. We had a very good colleague who came to work to Austin maybe 6 months after I did. She did well, but she left about 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago, just before COVID. She took a job with Google. She went through the entire interviewing process without talking to anybody. It was all electronic and all with artificial intelligence. Cities and municipalities, HR processes tend to be very cumbersome. They tend to be very archaic, and they tend to be written for something that happened a long time ago and not adjusted as quickly. So those things are necessary. They tend to be paper-driven and paper-intensive as opposed to digital, which is kind of the rubric under which we're discussing. So Austin Energy is looking to be innovative on all of those fronts. Finally, and most important to me, we're looking to be, and so is the city, far more involved in the diversity and inclusion space, because all studies show that when you have a diverse set of opinions, a diverse set of perspectives, you're more likely to come up with better answers than if everybody thinks the exact same way, if everybody has the exact same cultural experiences. I always tell people, if it's 10 of us in a room and all of us are alike, then none of us are redundant. So that's the other aspect that we need to be looking at.
Good. Llewelyn?
I salute all of this, but I think you've got to look at the development of the whole country and its place in the world. You can't look at the world from just Austin, and you can't look at the country from just Austin. You've got to look at other things, and you cannot look future development, employment, entrepreneurism, invention, creation, purely in terms of things digital. That is only a part of the totality of the effort that makes up a country. And it's not going to change. We're going to have more digitization of everything, but we're not going to have, therefore, more people employed in digitization.
Exactly.
Digitization, by definition, is an employment subtractor, not an adder. You go to AI in order to reduce and simplify your working situation, ergo you lose jobs, and they have to go somewhere else, and I'm hopeful that they will. You will see, various times, various parts of the country will be hot in the way that Austin is hot now. You remember that basically for 50 years, California was hot, and the influx of people and work and ideas and creativity into California was huge, and it's only faltered very recently. You're going to see times when Texas is the golden state and times when it's less so, and other places, for other reasons not now known, will achieve the same kind of magnet status. That as national policy, you want to make sure that you have prosperity across the country, that you don't have cities and states beggaring other cities and states by doing their level best to get all the talent, all the innovation, because that doesn't make for a national prosperity, that makes for a sort of tribal fight. And I think we need to bear those things in mind. I think because there is so much innovation, innovation breeds innovation. Each new invention brings about a set of other inventions. The Wright brothers learned to fly. They didn't learn radio, radar, high tensile alloys, aluminum. Those things were collateral developments to flying. When you get this kind of high-tech development we're seeing at the moment, there will be collateral developments that will not be themselves high-tech, but will in fact employ more people than the high-tech, in the way that the collateral development around airplanes employs far more people than the airline industry. And by the way, Andre, I'd just like to tell you that airlines are public transportation.
John.
Well, I think that the analysis will move from cities to regions. I think if you look at how regions prosper, that's what we're looking at now. So I think you have a combination of the Western region, the Texas region, and the Southern region. I think because of digitization, regions will work together. And I think it is important that the new technologies are commercialized. And I think that's been related to the universities. I think one of the reasons why Tesla is moving here is because of the University of Texas here. I think that Stanford created Silicon Valley through technology transfer. I think MIT had a big do with what happened in Boston. I think New York City count our money, but it's not very innovative. They certainly know how to count our money. So I think the unit of analysis, everybody's correct, but the unit of analysis will not be the city-state anymore. It will be the regions in which you find yourself. And regions will prosper instead of cities.
Well said, well said. Charles. Absolutely, you will see regions prosper and regions rise and fall, partly determined by the innate abilities of the people there, even if they are not schooled in what is going to come, and also other resources, including climate. Climate is a resource. As we get more warming, some parts of the country will be less attractive, and people will not want to live there, and they will want to go back possibly to what was called the Rust Belt. I don't know, but I think that's an extremely probable eventuality.
Well, the question was asked, how did the University of Texas become a great university? The answer was the Board of Regents voted in 1950 to air condition all the buildings.
When did it reach the 80s? I wasn't aware.
Thank God for Willie's Carrier, Buffalo, 1905.
Hey, Andres, I know that I got on a little late, but I'm running late for another meeting. You were about to ask me something.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted that you joined us. Thank you for participating today. I'm gonna give you the floor for a few moments to say your parting thoughts and any message you want to give to the audience.
Yeah, so my first parting thought is that I learned more from this discussion than I came in with. And I mean that sincerely, not to flatter the gentleman. Llewelyn, thank you. John, thank you. It's good seeing you again. I think all that we talked about is valuable. I think that all is valid. There's some competing points, but I think the differences around the margins. John's right around regions. We actually, Austin Energy actually participates in a regional call with the other utilities in Central Texas. So he reminded me of something that I'm doing without me having told him about it, because he's right, because we have to take a regional approach. Llewelyn is right. I agree with him. We have to be careful with digitization. I talked about this a little bit. There is a necessary outcome of a displacement of people as we do that. We need to figure out what else might those people be able to do, but what else might that they do so that their lives are still relevant and meaningful. Otherwise, we continue to recycle through the kind of the issues we're dealing with. And my last thought is we're still early on in COVID. And what we know is changing on the margins daily. And we just need to be ever diligent and keep that at the top of our mind as we think through what we're going to do.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thank you for joining us. John, where's your guitar? Take us away. What do you do?
I got to take a song for Lou. You know, when you're in traffic, remember Llewelyn, still is still moving to me. And I swim like a fish in the sea all the time. And that's what it takes for me to be there. I don't mind. Still is still moving to me. Still is still moving to me. Now, you know, I don't know how it feels. Now, I can't put it in words, but I know that it's real. I can be moving in traffic. I can be still is still moving to me. Still is still moving to me. Remember that,
Thank you,
Llewelyn.
guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Y'all be good.
All the best.